What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Punching Up. I am your host, Maya May, and it has been a long 2 weeks. I think it's starting to set in. We're settling into the idea that Donald Trump is president-elect. I don't want to hear anything about election interference right now because by sticking our head in the sand and trying to ignore the reality about what is to come, we're not going to be prepared, and we do not want to be flat-footed. Now, we've been screaming a long time about Project 2025, and a lot of people were like, well, that's not the plan. And we're like, well, why would they have put together such a lengthy plan if it wasn't the plan? A playbook is a playbook, and they intend to use it. And so tonight we are going to be talking to Andra Watkins about Project 2025 because she has been one of the people who has been sounding the alarm for a very long time, and in a very gentle way as well, because for me, I'm like, I feel like I'm screaming into the void, people, why isn't anyone listening? And she's managed to shift from, okay, that was the plan. Now they've implemented the plan. Things didn't go so well. And so now we've got to shift and figure out what we're going to do. And so I am wearing this bright cherry shirt because I feel like I should dress for the attitude that I would like to have. And so I encourage all of y'all to figure out what tricks and tips and tools and things that you need to feel good right now, because if we're all gloom and doom, it's going to be very difficult to think our way out of this. So I think we should just get the show started. I think I'm ready to do that. I was trying to think if I had something else for you, some other advice, hydrate. Other than that, no, I'm ready to bring in our guest. So Andra Watkins, come on in. New York Times best-selling author and a survivor of Christian nationalism. Her Substack, For Such a Time as This, Decoding America 2025. It's an essential read for anyone wanting to make it through this chaos. It's a lot of chaos. A lot's going on. Welcome to the show, Andra. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Maya. I have to say, it's so great to meet you in person because I've watched your energy online for months now. And so I'm so excited to be talking to you and everyone else. But it's just really great to be here. I'm excited.
I'm excited that you're here because while I am not a survivor of Christian nationalism, I did accidentally walk into an evangelical church a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was a coffee shop, and all of a sudden it was like, no, this is a church, and you believe that I'm going to hell, and my family's going to hell for the things that we believe. And I was like, oh dear. I've long been interested in that aspect of things. So real quick, like what, for the people, and I'm sure our audience knows you, but just really quickly, what just made you decide to spread the word about your experiences and how this kind of all dovetails into Project 2025?
Well, I grew up in South Carolina. If you can't tell by now, I've never lived out of the South of the U.S., so I've never gotten rid of that accent. And my parents joined a Christian Nationalist church and put me in a school when I was in kindergarten in the 70s. So this was moral majority era, Jerry Falwell Sr. era, Christian nationalism. And I was indoctrinated in that as a child and a teenager. I started moving away from it in my late 20s and early 30s and really didn't like to talk about any of it. And then I picked up Project 2025 last fall and started reading it. And I wasn't 10 pages into it before I was seeing Bible verses that I'd been forced to memorize in Christian nationalism buried in the text of this document. They weren't called out as Bible verses, but I was like, this is a Bible verse, and here's the Bible verse, and here's this concept that I was indoctrinated in, and he let me explain that to people. And so I read the whole thing and just marked it up with tons of that stuff. So in January, I decided maybe I can be useful. Maybe there's a reason why I've had this life that I've had, and I can explain that this is a Christo-fascist manifesto to change America from a democracy to a theocracy. And I can systematically explain how they intend to do that and how they're using Christian nationalism and the tenets of it to build that into the government and make that the religion of the government. And Rick Wilson was really the first high profile person who said, wow, you're the only person who's talking about this way. And it's really important. And I see it all. And I'm going to have you on my show. So he was really the first person with a national presence who gave me a platform to start talking about this document. So that's my experience with it.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because when I read about Christian nationalism and I see its impact, and then I turn on the news and I don't see them screaming about it, and I'm going, how are we not connecting the dots in a way that this is getting wall-to-wall coverage? Like, that's one of the things that has bothered me. And so as we're nearing the election, and I'm assuming, was it terrifying as you were like reading Project 2025 and having to communicate that to people? Like, did you feel like you were trying to stop a freight train that was coming?
Yes. And, I grew up in this, so I know how they oppress women. I know how they treat, minorities. I know how they treat LGBTQ people and trans people. I didn't want anyone else to have to live through that. And so I felt like I was saying, I survived what they want to do to everyone, and you do not want to live in that world. And so that's how I approached it in trying to talk about it. And even on my Substack, I would outline, this is what they believe. For example, about sex. They do not believe sex deserves a right to privacy. Christian nationalists believe that Old Testament God judges countries when two people fornicate and they're not married, So they believe that they have a right to be in our bedrooms telling us how we have sex and who we can have sex with. Clarence Thomas has even foreshadowed some of that in his recent Supreme Court opinions. So they very much believe that sex exists for procreation between a heterosexual couple, one man married to one unrelated woman. And that is all sex is good for them. And so I tried to explain, here's how this could impact you as an average American, thinking this won't impact me. If you live with someone you're not married to, if you
cohabitation. Cohabitation used to be illegal in some places,
and it would be again if they fully recognized this document and followed the tenets of Christian nationalism. It would be again, thruples and swingers and all those kinds of things would of course be, just horrible perversions of, sex. And I mean, Mike Johnson is on the record as calling homosexuality pornography, and
also, this is where I ask myself, like, why weren't the Bumbles of the world and the Matches of the world and all these different dating apps being heavily involved in politics? Because I could very well see a world in which they're like, oh, no, none of these dating apps can be allowed to exist in this.
Grindr,
Well, I feel like they'll keep Grindr, because I feel like a lot of these guys are on Grindr. So, I mean, we saw that the usage of Grindr spiked during the Republican National Convention. So I think if one app survives, it might be Grindr. And a lot of people want to say that the election was about the economy. And obviously, for the Christian Nationalists, who were a big part of the voting bloc, economy, did it have anything at all to do with the economy?
I feel like some of them may have parroted those talking points, but really Christian nationalists, the ones that I grew up with and the church I grew up in, believe we're living in the end of the world right now. And so they very much embrace this apocalyptic vision that the world is going to end and Jesus Christ is going to descend from heaven and save all the Christians and send everyone else to hell. And that the world has to descend into this period called the Great Tribulation. And America is not specifically mentioned in the Bible as the United States of America. So therefore, in the end times, America doesn't exist. So there's, according to their interpretation of the Bible. So they very much have worked toward this policy of weakening America, because the Bible doesn't mention America in the last days, and they think we're living in the last days. And so it's horrifying to watch them use this biblical prophecy as our foreign policy. And
So,
and that's what they're doing, like, for example, with Mike Huckabee's appointment to be the ambassador to Israel. He's very much an apocalyptic Christian nationalist who believes that that land has to be intact. He doesn't care about the Jews, the people in it at all. It's just the land has to be intact for his Bible to come true and Jesus to come back.
and yet
I
none
know
of
this
this
sounds batshit crazy.
Well, that's the thing. So when you try to explain Christian nationalism to people who aren't familiar with it, and it's not their fault for not being familiar with it, because it's not something that we talk about in the press. It's not something that the mass media ever covers. And so when you do, it sounds like you're talking about some weird, fantastical Lord of the Rings land in which there's going to be, hell and brimfire. And of course, nobody wants to accept that that's the reality of what just got voted into office. And so how, as the votes were coming in how were you feeling, and how did you feel the next day, and how have you kind of processed everything over the last couple of weeks?
I didn't sleep for a week.
Damn.
And I had a very upset stomach for a week, because I know what just happened, and I know what it means, and I don't know how much of this has to happen for enough Americans to see this for what it is and stop saying you're being hysterical, stop saying they don't mean what they say. Oh, they didn't mean that, they're not really going to do these things. They mean every bit of it, and the steps that they're taking already very much indicate that they intend to implement every bit of Project 2025 as quickly as possible, which would lead to, persecution, really, for large swaths of the American population. If you're not a white Christian nationalist man, you probably will suffer under that regime.
So on November 11th, you posted, "Of all my Cassandra moments in recent days, the more visceral original title of this Substack will prove to have been prophetic, especially since so many men are publicly celebrating how much they are going to enjoy their God-given right to rape." Now, we all remember that was one of the first things that happened post-election was your body, my choice.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go from here? Because I know you've now pivoted to how do we stop this?
I've started trying to encourage people to think about nonviolent, non-confrontational defiance, and other people are talking about that as well. So I'm calling it purposeful disengagement. Purposeful disengagement is actually how Christian nationalists accomplished all this. I grew up in a shadow world where we had our own language, we had our own customs, we frequented businesses with people in the church. We didn't mingle a lot with the world, which was, sinful and wrong. So we had our own world happening, and that was purposefully disengaged from the sinful world. And so I am applying those same concepts to how we can be nonviolent and non-confrontational, but still be defiant and try to protest and disrupt this government.
So what does that look like? Because they are the government. Are we not paying taxes? What are we doing?
Well, first of all, I'm encouraging people to look at themselves individually, and take care of your individual self. Don't sit and mainline the news. Don't sit and be outraged all the time. I haven't watched the news or read any news since the election, since the day after the election, and I still know about this clown car shit show of cabinet appointees. I still know what's happening. So you don't have to sit and watch it all the time and get your blood pressure up to know what's happening. It's easy to stay informed. And I've also encouraged people to take care of themselves, to not waste this time, because who knows what things are going to look like in 6 months. We're still in this time where things feel the same, even though I know they're not. So I don't want to waste that. So I'm encouraging people to take care of themselves, take care of their families, do things that will be making memories that will matter to them, that they can hold on to. And then the next piece of it is the community piece, because we need to build communities on the ground that can take care of each other, where we can protect vulnerable people and we can take care of each other in the event that the electrical grid goes down or we can't get food because, deregulation causes so much of the food to be contaminated. Or we have bands of Proud Boys running through neighborhoods, looking for illegal people, and it disrupts supply chains or disrupts our ability to get out of our houses as much as we would like. So,
or the rapture happens, as a viewer points out.
It'd be great if the rapture would happen, and then all those people would be gone, and maybe we could live in a more sane world. But
that actually, it's like, is this like is that what the Thanos snap was all about? Is that really what the Avengers was? Is like everybody, half those folks leaving, and then we can just be chill? Well, because I'm hearing you say these things, right? And like, you're saying it in such like a calm, very sober way. And I'm sure a lot of the people watching are like, holy shit, do I have my go bag ready? Do I have my freeze dried food? Should I be canning vegetables right now? And I have been talking quite a bit about getting ourselves like prepared mentally, emotionally, spiritually for whatever's to come, because no matter what, it's a win-win. Like, hey, maybe nothing happens. Maybe they don't implement Project 2025, but you're in the best shape of your life. Like,
right.
That's literally like you can never go wrong with prepping, because to me, Trump is a national disaster. We should prepare like it's a natural disaster, meaning do all the things.
I'm likening that stuff to preparing a hurricane kit. I mean, I live in a hurricane zone, so it's kind of like that. So, but also I've advised people to look at your online life and make sure that you've locked down your online life and you have a VPN in place. Get your passport if you don't have one. Get copies of your medical records. Get anything you need, that you might not be able to get in a few months, and have a stock of it. I've even been I told my niece, get some pregnancy tests over the counter, because one of the best ways that they could implement tracking pregnancies is to force people to go to a doctor's office to confirm that they're pregnant and not enable them to take a pregnancy test at home. So I've been giving that kind of advice too. But then, and there's lots of resources on my Substack. Readers have written in. There's 2 different newsletters that people can go through and get lots of ideas about how to do that piece of this preparation, with groups to liaise with, people on the ground. So there's a lot there. But then the third piece is the purposeful economic disengagement, which some people could call a boycott, but I don't really want to call it that. It's more tools to see who supports fascism so that we don't shop there, and how do we not spend money, because the American economy is propped up by excessive spending and materialism. And so if within our communities we find ways to hold on to our money, to not spend money, that would end up negatively impacting the economy over time. And it's not something that we could really be blamed for. So it's kind of gaslighting the economy, which I like. If enough of us did it, 70 some million people didn't vote for this. So if even a fraction of those people said, you know what, I'm not going to spend any money with a fascist company, and I'm going to hold on to my money and only buy what I absolutely need to feed and clothe and shelter myself and my family, that would have a serious negative impact on the economy. What?
Does that include cupcakes?
You could make cupcakes.
I have a really favorite cupcake place, and I feel like my cupcake guy will be so upset that you suggested I bake my own cupcakes during our
but here's the thing. We have people in our communities that we need to take care of, and your cupcake place is probably one of those places. Okay. But I'm not going to go out and buy a new TV. I'm not going to spend a bunch of money on new computer equipment. I'm not making major purchases that contribute to this materialistic economy. So, but we can support each other in our communities and make sure that we're keeping the businesses that we want to keep going.
I'm glad you mentioned the 70 million or so that didn't vote for him, because a lot of people are still falling for this is a mandate. The majority voted for him. And I'm thinking about the people who didn't vote, not just the people who had no idea what they were in store for, who are living an apolitical life, thinking that democracy could just run on autopilot, as if our country has been around for so long that it's just on its course to no. And so I feel like a lot of those folks are going to be waking up in the next 6 months going, wait, what happened? I didn't vote for this. Well, you didn't vote for anything. And that's why we're here. So it's inevitable. This administration's coming in. As far as resisting, sure, economic disengagement, but how do we stay connected with each other in a way that we're regularly communicating and building? Because we see that the platforms, like already X is a complete and total cesspool. How do we continue to connect with each other in a way that's scalable, right? Because it's one thing to be in your local community, but how do we connect in a way that's scalable so that we can have a chance at turning this around by the time we get to the next election?
I know a lot of people have joined Blue Sky, and I apparently have a lot of people talking about my work over there, but I haven't joined it. It is it's scattered, so it's harder for them to mess with. I'm changing a lot of my contact information and only giving my contact information out going forward to people that I want to have it. So one of my readers mentioned Says Us, and Lisa's mentioning it there. We've had some conversations preliminarily about, could that be a place where we know it's not going to be taken over by a fascist billionaire, where we could confidently build this kind of community where we could stay connected on a bigger scale. So I think some of those conversations have started happening, and we need to continue to be having them. I think part of the reason we're here is because we're so disconnected in our communities. So I really have encouraged people. One of the things that I said on one of my Substacks was, we just had Harris signs all over your neighborhood. So why don't you do a door knocking campaign and go and introduce yourself to these neighbors who voted for Harris? And since you're probably not speaking to your MAGA family members and you don't want to have Thanksgiving with them anyway, why don't y'all get together and have Thanksgiving with people who are actually sane? So, and try to foster some of that kind of connection again as well, because I feel like between COVID and all of our devices, we've lost a lot of that. And that kind of connection is going to be really important to bubbling up to what you're talking about with the online connection across the country and how we continue to defiantly resist this regime.
Yeah, and when you say, the idea is that it be nonviolent, and what concerns me is some of the laws that have been made to prevent people from protesting safely, laws that have been passed in Florida, laws that have been passed in Texas, that do seem to threaten the right to assembly. Would your suggestion be that people maybe not go out and have mass protests because it feels
That's what I've said to my readers. I know there will be people who will do that, and they're honestly dying to get out all the military and run over people with tanks and have this horrible, violent, terrifying spectacle. And I don't want to give them that. We don't have to give them that to resist. It may take time to disengage from the economy and stop spending as much money as we've been spending and have that impact the economy. But the great thing about that is it's going to be blamed on them when the economy crashes, because they have it all. So they get to own the crash of the economy this time. If we can pull back on spending and not support the wrong things.
Do you think it was actually, a silver lining of this cloud is that they are going to control all branches of the government really entirely? And so because my fear is that they'll just find another scapegoat, that they can always find another scapegoat and be able to point the blame elsewhere.
Well, it's pretty horrifying to me as the people I know in my life who are still wrapped up in that. And I pretty much don't talk to any of them anymore, but there's just always a reason why what they're seeing in front of their eyes is not really what they're seeing. And they'll always find a way to explain it away. And that's part of cult-like thinking. And I know that because I grew up being programmed that way. And I know how difficult it is to deprogram that. So it's a lot of work. It's really embarrassing when you realize this is what I've been doing and how I've been acting and talking and treating other people. And now I have to do all this work to undo that. It's hard. And a lot of these people won't ever do that. So
let's brainstorm a little bit. I want to run an idea past you.
Okay.
So I feel like a lot of people have a hard time understanding that mindset. Like truly, like they're like, oh, wait until they see what happens and they'll realize that what they voted for and etc. My suggestion is that people start to attend some of these churches just to get an insight, firsthand experience of what they're being told day in and day out. It's one thing to read it in a book. It's one thing to, and I could never go to a MAGA rally, right? Like that was something I could never do. That's not safe for me. All right. It was going to take a lot of, I don't even know what, to get myself in and out of a MAGA rally safely. But I feel like I could walk into an evangelical church, into a Christian Nationalist church. Maybe not. Hey, nobody screenshot. I just realized we should have been doing this brainstorming behind closed doors. But anyway, it's out there. There I am, Maya May. I want to infiltrate the churches to figure out what they're doing. No, but in all seriousness, I kind of want people to have a visceral understanding of what these communities are being told so that they can actually have a little bit of empathy for people who have been pulled into this life. It's what they've grown up with. It's all they know. And so I feel like if we were able to understand that, rather than being like, oh, these people want to destroy our lives and destroy our country, we can have the empathy of like, oh, they've been in this since they were 3. They know nothing else. And maybe that might give us some inroads on how to handle it. I don't know. Is it safe is what I'm saying is my recommendation of people checking out the church.
I don't think it's unsafe to attend their churches. I'm not doing that, but I don't think it's unsafe for other people to. On my Substack, I've got lots and lots and lots of newsletters about Christian nationalists, what they believe, how they talk, how they change language, how they change words and what words mean. So I've done a lot of education on my Substack for people who many of them had no idea what Christian nationalism was when they started with me. And so I don't know that any of them would feel like they needed to go to a Christian nationalist church to have that experience. They feel
no
like
field trip. Are you saying no field trip is a part of the curriculum, Andra? I just want a field trip. Come on.
Well, you can have one. I'm not saying to do it. I mean, that is one way to experience, and it is very jarring because they speak a different language. They really don't have boundaries. So, and they very much talk at you and expect you to agree with them. They don't really listen to you or care. As soon as you say something that goes off of what they're interested in or what their worldview is, they cut you off and they force their worldview on you. So it's a very jarring experience to go into one of those churches for people who haven't done that.
Yeah, and I've long been fascinated by religions. I went to Catholic school. I went to my grandmother's Baptist church. My parents used to take me to an ashram, and so for me, I look at it as a point of curiosity. When I accidentally wandered into that church that I thought was a coffee house, I just asked questions for the first half hour. Then I was like, I don't know about the stuff that you believe, but I managed to keep my cover, is what I'm saying. And so it feels like because we're entering into a new era of being, I want us to start thinking, I guess, outside the box even more about how we approach these things, and maybe having that understanding might be helpful. But I don't want to say I'm recommending a field trip. I don't want anybody to get triggered or get hurt
Well,
at a
somebody
church.
want a field trip to the Cupcake Man with you, so
Okay.
Great.
That's actually, I was like, I will share my Cupcake Man with everybody because he is fantastic and keeps me functioning. Really, I function on cupcakes at this point. That is how I survive. Andra, thank you so much for joining us. I want just one more question. Yes, please. This is for such a time as this. A Guide to Decode the Country America Has Chosen to Be. Please check out Andra's Substack. If I'm going in undercover, what's one thing I should or shouldn't say to try to fit in? And when you speak about the language that they use and shift into, what's one bit of advice
that you shouldn't say to try to fit in?
Yeah, like if I want to.
Don't, if you go into an evangelical church, don't tell them you grew up Catholic. Oh. They believe all Catholics are going to hell. Even though there's the Opus Dei, there's the J.D. Vances, there's the Samuel Alitos, there is a Christian Nationalist Catholic wing as well. They're all working together now, but they all believe each other are going to hell. So don't tell them, don't say you grew up Catholic.
I feel like now we need a part 2 of this show because that's just
I'm down for that if you want to do that. I'd be happy to do it.
Well, yeah, I think we're going to need to touch base because I really do think people aren't prepared mentally and emotionally for what's to come. And part of what I want to do on this show is to help people prepare in a way that doesn't feel debilitating because like this is our one life to live. And I'd like to try to enjoy it as much as possible and not be curled up in the fetal position like, oh my God, what's to come? It's like, no, we can approach it with a critical eye, and we can approach it with a level of understanding. And this is a perfect time for creative thinking and creative approaches. So what a great opportunity to flex our critical thinking muscles or something like that.
Right.
Yes. So thank you for joining us, and I will see you soon.
Thanks, Maya. I loved being here.
Thanks. Guys, we have a lot of work to do, and I know it's only been 2 weeks, but we do have to get past the, oh my God, what are we going to do phase into these are the tools that we are going to use phase. So people like Andra Watkins are going to be our guiding light right now. So I urge you to please find her and others who can help sort of chart this path, because if we all do it together, it's going to be a lot easier, and we're all going to have days. I don't want everybody to think that I'm up here like, everything's wonderful and great. I have had a week upon weeks upon weeks, and so we all have our lives going on. And I think the most important thing we can do right now is to not allow this to be our new normal. We cannot let fascism be normalized. When we see these news anchors suddenly starting to turn the page and think like, oh, okay, this is the new. No, absolutely not. If you need to write down what reality is in a journal right now, write it down. I was talking on Twitter with somebody about that today. Like, write it down. Understand what your reality is right now, so that a year from now you have something to look back to and go, okay, this is who I am. This is what I'm thinking. So we got work to do, y'all. I'm going to start adding a syllabus at the end of this. I think I'm going to start giving out homework assignments, to be honest with you, not just for you, but also for me, so that we can kind of keep a little structure going on, because with all this chaos, it's easy to just kind of spin off the rails, and we don't want to do that. That chaos is for them. It's not for us. It's not going to help us. So thank you for joining me for this week's Punching Up. We got some upcoming shows. I'm pretty excited to talk to Jen Murcia again. Love her. Jason Stanley, How Fascism Works. He wrote a damn book and nobody freaking implemented any of the stuff that was in there. Drives me nuts. Both of these two are some of my favorite people. So please join us for those shows. And in the meantime, hydrate, prepare yourself. I'm journaling, boxing, cold plunges now, sauna, all of the things. Make your self-care routine 3 hours if you have to. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And I will see you next week.